Hi everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into this video. In this video I'm going to do something a little different. I've never shown you guys how I actually drain my loops, and my loops I don't have a drain port, so what I have to do is actually do a little bit of different way than what you normally would do, and it usually is a little more time consuming, but it's a safe and effective way if you don't want to use a drain port. So the computer that I'm going to be draining is my friend's computer build, and if you watched my past videos, I did a whole video log series on this exact build. So what I'm going to be doing is draining this loop because he got a GTX Titan Black, and he wants me to install that. So this whole video is going to be about draining the loop and also installing the new loop with the GTX Titan Black. So the first step in draining your loop, if you do not have a drain port, is to actually empty any liquid that you can from the reservoir. And I like to do this is just to get my syringe and suck up all the liquid inside the reservoir. And this is one advantage of using a tube reservoir than a bay reservoir, is because the tube reservoirs are much easier to drain. As you can see, just pop the lid off and basically drop your syringe right in and suck all that fluid out. So here I went ahead and finished emptying out my reservoir, and as you can see there's a lot of fluid inside the reservoir. There's the most fluid is actually inside your reservoir than actually your tubing or your radiators. So now we're looking at the overall build, and you can tell that the reservoir is empty. Now once you empty your reservoir, you're actually halfway done. I mean, you've done most of the work, and it's very easy to just drain that reservoir right out, especially with the tube reservoir. So now what we got to do is we actually have to focus on refilling that reservoir, and to do that, what we have to do is tip the case back and forth and side to side to fill the reservoir up. So the reason why we want to try to fill the reservoir back up is because it's much easier to just suck out the fluid out of the reservoir than it is to take all your hoses apart and trying to drain it that way. So as you can see here, I'm actually tipping the case upside down, and you can see the reservoir filling up with quite a bit of fluid. Now that's great because we're going to be able to just empty that reservoir right out again. So a lot of you are probably wondering what the actual advantages are, if any, in not using a drain. So when you don't have to use a drain, you don't have to worry about how your loop is going to look, or you always have to constantly think of, oh, I have the drain I have to put in, so you're going to have to rearrange. Maybe you have a radiator at the bottom, you're going to have to rearrange your loop configuration to support that drain. And a lot of people don't like having to do that, having to put the drain in, and also your constraint on space, especially down in the lower chambers of your case. So not using a drain is just a lot easier to just run your loop how you'd like it without having to worry about space constraints, and also worrying about where you're going to put it. But if you're using acrylic tubing, I highly recommend a drain. So now we're going to move on. We've got pretty much as we can back into the reservoir with just moving the case back and forth. So now what we're going to do is actually add a nozzle or hose on top of the reservoir. Now this reservoir's top is threaded with a G1/4 inch thread, and that allows us to place a fitting on top to attach a hose to. Now this makes it great, especially when you're not using a drain, is because now you can move that liquid somewhere else while you're tipping upside down the case. So what we're going to do is actually pull the reservoir outward so we could tip it upside down. So I know this looks insane, but it works. So just what you're going to do now is just move the case. You're going to tip the case upside down and try to get as much liquid as you can out of the topmost part of the case, or the water loop, and in this case it would be the top radiator. So once we have all the liquid, as much as we can, taken out, you're not going to be able to get all of it out, especially water that's trapped in the lower radiator down there, and that's okay because you could just cut the tubing and pull the radiator out and drain it that way. And that's the good thing about using it with soft tubing, not using a drain, because what we're going to do next is actually cut the tubing in sections out at a time and plugging the nozzles, so in case there's any left in there, it won't drip out. And this allows you to remove every piece of the computer out. If you want to take the radiators out, if you want to take the graphics cards out, and in my case I just want to remove the graphics cards, so this works out perfectly. So what we're going to do now is start with the topmost part of the case again, which is going to be our top radiator. We're going to cut the tubing out of that, and we're just going to remove it by sections. And to do this, we're just going to be using some paper towel, and this is going to act as a plug in case there's any liquid left, and we're going to use our tube cutter here and just cut the tube in the little sections, like I said. So I usually start with the CPU just because it's centralized in our loop, and also we have to get rid of this tubing if we want to remove our graphics cards. So there is still some fluid left in the CPU. You're not going to be able to get all of it out, but that's why we plug it the hole right here with some paper towel, just in case there's any that's gonna, it's not going to be a lot. It's just gonna be like a couple drips or a little bit of flow. So this paper towel will soak up any that comes out if you happen to tip the case back or and forth. And we'll go ahead and plug the GPU side as well. So now we're going to cut the tubing from the 360mm rad at the top to our CPU. And this will allow us to free our CPU out of the loop and change the tubing to give it some new tubing. Now this tubing is a little bit stained, as you can tell. The fluid's probably been in there for a good 8 months or so, and you will get staining. I mean, there's no getting away around that. Your tube's going to stain eventually. So we're just going to go ahead and give this build on the front side part here some brand new tubing. So at this point, what you can do is just start taking out the other components in the system. So what I did here was I just took the tubing off the GPU, plugged the hole up with another paper towel, and now I'm just going to start removing the sound card, the graphics card, and the network card. But first, we got to cut the tubing from the bottom GPU to the reservoir. So what I did was just cut it, and then I plugged it once again. Now we can take all the components out. So here you can see I have taken everything out. I have what I left is the CPU in there, and I went ahead and plugged the holes just in case, and you can see the GPUs and everything else is removed. So now we're ready to install the beastly GTX Titan Black. As you can see, I already put the water block on there, and he also got a black backplate, so I went ahead and installed that on there for him too. And there we have the GTX Titan Black installed inside the system. Now we're ready to tube it up into our new loop configuration and fill it. So here I went ahead and installed all new tubing, and one thing I wanted to do was make sure the bottom loop going from the GTX Titan Black to the reservoir was big enough, because he wants to add a second one in here pretty soon. So I want to be able to have allow him enough room to fit the graphics card with the air cooler on there just for now until he decides to water cool his second GTX Titan Black. So now we're ready to fill the loop. So using the same process I always do, I always just grab my syringe, start sucking fluid out of the bottle, and placing it inside the reservoir. Now he went ahead again with the Mayhem's pastel blueberry coolant. Very good coolant, lasts a long time, and it looks great. So we're ready to turn the pump on for the first time, and what I do is I grab my PSU Jumper plug. Now I actually hand make these and sell these on my new website and store, so if you could go ahead and check it out. I'll leave the link in the description if you want to purchase one. So all you got to do is place this on the end of your 24-pin connector from your PSU, and what it does is it tricks your power supply into thinking it's connected to your motherboard, and it turns it on and allows you to gain power to your pump without having to power your motherboard. So now just flick the switch on your power supply and it will turn on your pump, and this will allow you to start cycling the fluid through your loop. And then make sure to turn the pump off once your reservoir is empty, as you do not want the pump to suck air. So what I did is I filled up the reservoir once again, and we're ready to turn the power supply on again to cycle fluid through the loop. And at this point, there's enough fluid inside the reservoir to continuously run the pump. Now this way, it will allow you to get all the air out of the loop while it's cycling through. And this is another advantage of using the tube reservoir. It's really easy to bleed air out of your loop. Just basically run the loop just as is, and it will, within a day or so, it will alleviate all the bubbles inside the loop. And what you want to do is just tilt the case back and forth until all the air bubbles are out that you can see. And here it is, nice and full. So I only had about 2 days to do this. I had to do a real quick turnaround for my friend. It was basically a real fast upgrade to build for him, which is why it might seem a little bit rushed. I'm very sorry about that. But I really hope you guys learned something from this. Maybe you got more comfortable with draining your loop, especially if you don't have a drain. And if not, maybe hopefully it was entertaining for you. And that about wraps up this video. Thank you so much, you guys, for watching. Please comment, rate, subscribe, and check out my new business, modbunker.com. I sell a lot of great sleeving supplies and products, and also like my business page on Facebook. And until next time, thank you guys, and have a great day.